The champagne glass was still in my hand when my son's future mother-in-law stood up, tapped her knife against her wine glass, and said to the entire rehearsal dinner, "I want to make a toast to Dorothy, the woman who somehow managed to raise a boy like Marcus all by herself. I suppose even a broken home can accidentally produce something useful." 60 guests went silent. Some looked at their plates, some covered their mouths, and my son, Marcus, sitting beside his fiancée, turned white like someone had ripped the air out of his lungs. My fingers tightened around the glass stem so hard I thought it would snap. My chest burned, but then I looked that woman straight in the face and said, "You must have forgotten who I am, Patricia. Or should I call you by the name you used 30 years ago?" Her smile disappeared like a light switching off. Her hand trembled, and for 1 second, just one, I saw pure terror in her eyes, and in that second, I understood everything. She had not invited me to celebrate. She had invited me to destroy me. But she did not know that I carried a secret about her that could destroy her instead. Let me go back to the beginning, because this story did not start in that restaurant. It started in a small apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, where the kitchen faucet dripped at night and the hallway light never worked right. I raised my son alone. I do not say that to earn sympathy. I say it because it shaped everything about how I see people and how I sense danger. When Marcus was 3 years old, his father went to work at the steel plant on a Tuesday morning and never came home. There was an accident. They told me he did not suffer, but I have never believed that, because I suffered for years after, and grief does not care about what people tell you. After the funeral, I had $42 in checking, and a toddler who kept asking when Daddy was coming back. I got a job as a nurse's aide at a hospital across town. The pay was small, the hours were long, and the bus ride home took 45 minutes each way. But I showed up every single shift because Marcus needed shoes, Marcus needed food, and Marcus needed to see his mother fight even when the world had knocked her flat. Years passed slowly. I moved from aide to licensed practical nurse. I studied at night after Marcus went to sleep, my textbook open on the kitchen table next to his crayon drawings. I eventually passed my registered nurse exam on the second try, and I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot and crying, not because I was sad, but because I had done it without anyone helping me. Marcus grew up quiet and careful, the way children grow when they have watched a parent carry heavy things alone. He was good with numbers. He could add grocery prices in his head before we reached the register. By high school, he was winning math competitions. He earned a full scholarship to college, and the day he left for campus, I stood at the bus station waving until the bus was a dot, and then I sat on the bench and cried again. He studied finance. He got a job at a firm in Chicago. He called me every Sunday, and those calls kept me going through the quiet weeks when my apartment felt too empty. Then he met Annabeth. She was beautiful, polished, the kind of woman who never had to worry about the price of anything. Her family had money, the old kind that does not talk about itself but makes sure everyone notices. Her mother was Patricia Pemberton, a name that appeared on charity boards and museum plaques all over the North Shore. Her father, Richard Pemberton, ran a private investment firm that managed money for very wealthy families. When Marcus first told me about Annabeth, I heard something in his voice I had never heard before, nervousness mixed with hope. He said, "Mum, she is different from anyone I have ever met." I said, "Different how?" He paused. "She makes me feel like I belong somewhere bigger than where I started." That made me proud and worried at the same time, because belonging somewhere should never mean forgetting where you came from. The first time I met Annabeth, she came to my apartment in Cleveland. She brought flowers and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my electric bill. She was polite. She complimented my cooking. She asked about the photographs on my wall, the ones of Marcus as a baby, the one of my late husband in his work uniform. She seemed genuine, but I noticed her eyes scanning the apartment the way someone scans a menu at a restaurant they think is beneath them. Quick, then away. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Love is more important than money. I believed that then. I believe it now. Then Marcus said, "Mum, Annabeth's parents want to meet you. They are hosting a dinner." Something about the way he said it made my instincts hum. Not loud, just a low vibration, the kind a nurse learns to feel before a patient's vitals drop. We drove to the Pemberton house in Lake Forest. It sat on a hill behind iron gates, surrounded by trees that looked like they had been groomed by hand. The driveway was longer than my entire block back in Cleveland. A woman in a white uniform opened the front door, and I remember thinking, even their help wears nicer clothes than I do on a good day. Richard Pemberton shook my hand firmly. He was tall, silver-haired and quiet. He looked at me the way engineers look at blueprints, trying to figure out if the structure is sound. He said, "Welcome, Dorothy. Marcus speaks very highly of you." That felt honest. But when Patricia Pemberton walked in from the next room, something happened inside me that I could not explain. My stomach tightened. My skin prickled. She wore a cream-colored dress and gold earrings, and she smiled at me with a smile that looked rehearsed, like something she had practiced in a mirror until it looked warm enough. She said, "Dorothy, so lovely to finally meet the woman behind the man." She held my hand a beat too long, and her eyes searched my face the way someone searches a crowd for a person they are trying to avoid. I felt like I had seen her before. Not in a photograph, not on television. Somewhere real, somewhere that smelled like disinfectant and fluorescent lights, but I could not place it. So I let it go. During dinner, Patricia asked me questions that felt less like curiosity and more like an audit. Where did you attend nursing school? Did Marcus's father leave any insurance? How did you manage childcare on a nurse's salary? Each question was wrapped in a polite voice, but the meaning underneath was sharp. She was measuring me, calculating whether I was a liability. At one point she said, "I admire women who do it all alone. It must require such resilience." The way she said resilience, slow and careful, made it sound like a disease rather than a strength. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table. Annabeth looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Richard ate his steak and pretended he did not hear. On the drive home, Marcus said, "I am sorry, Mum. She is like that with everyone." I nodded, but I did not believe him. She was not like that with everyone. She was like that with me, specifically, deliberately, and I did not yet know why. Over the next few months, Patricia's behavior followed a pattern. She would invite Marcus and Annabeth to family events and mention my name only when she needed to say something condescending. She sent Marcus a gift card to a men's clothing store with a note that read, "For when you need to look the part." She suggested a wedding planner who specialized in blending families from different backgrounds, as if my background were a stain that needed professional cleaning. And then something happened that changed everything. Marcus called me on a Wednesday night, which was unusual because he always called on Sundays. His voice was tight. "Mum, something is wrong at work." He worked at a firm that handled financial accounts for several high-net-worth clients. One of those clients was the Pemberton Family Foundation. Marcus told me he had found irregularities. Large amounts of money had been moved between accounts in ways that did not match the foundation's records. Donations that were supposed to go to children's hospitals and education programs were being redirected. Not lost. Redirected. Into private accounts. He said, "I do not want to believe what I am seeing." I said, "Then look harder until you are sure." He went quiet for a moment. "Mum, if this is what I think it could hurt Annabeth. It could destroy her family." I took a breath. "Marcus, if someone is stealing money meant for sick children, the truth matters more than anyone's comfort." He did not answer right away, and I knew he was caught between the woman he loved and the honesty I had taught him to carry. A week later, Marcus proposed to Annabeth. She said yes. Patricia immediately took control of the wedding plans. She booked a venue, chose the flowers, hired the caterer, and selected the guest list, all without asking me a single question. When I mentioned that I would like to invite a few friends from Cleveland, Patricia smiled that rehearsed smile and said, "The guest list is quite full already. Perhaps they can watch the live stream." I swallowed my pride because Marcus was happy, and a mother will swallow a lot of things to protect her child's joy. The rehearsal dinner was held at a private restaurant in downtown Chicago. 60 guests, all from the Pemberton side except for me and 2 of Marcus's college friends. The room was dark wood and candlelight, the kind of place where even the bread costs more than a meal at my local diner. Everything felt controlled, like Patricia had choreographed every moment, and then she stood up to make her toast. She smiled at the room. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about Annabeth, about how proud she was, about the Pemberton legacy of excellence. And then she turned toward me. "And of course," she said, "we must acknowledge Dorothy, Marcus's mother, a woman who raised a boy all by herself in a little apartment in Cleveland." She paused. People smiled politely. I want to make a toast to Dorothy, the woman who somehow managed to raise a boy like Marcus all by herself. I suppose even a broken home can accidentally produce something useful. The room went cold. A woman near the back gasped quietly. Marcus's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscles in his neck tighten. Annabeth whispered, "Mother, stop." But Patricia was not done. She lifted her glass higher and said, "To Dorothy, may she always remember how fortunate her son is to have found a real family at last." My ears rang. My hands shook. But something else happened in that moment. When Patricia looked at me with that cruel smile, a memory broke through like light cracking through a wall. I knew her, not as Patricia Pemberton. I knew her as Patty Crane, a nurse who worked at Cleveland General Hospital 30 years ago. A nurse who made a terrible mistake and blamed it on me. And that was when I stood up and said, "You must have forgotten who I am, Patricia. Or should I call you by the name you used 30 years ago?" Her face collapsed. The rehearsed smile vanished. She set her glass down too fast, and wine splashed onto the white tablecloth like a wound. Let me tell you what happened 30 years ago, because without it, nothing else makes sense. In 1994, I was a registered nurse at Cleveland General. I worked the night shift in the cardiac unit. It was hard work, the kind that leaves your feet throbbing and your heart heavy. But I was good at it. Patients trusted me. Doctors respected me. I had earned my place there through years of study and sacrifice. There was another nurse on my unit. Her name was Patty Crane. She was younger than me, maybe 25, blonde, confident, always talking about how she was going to marry rich and leave nursing behind. She was careless in small ways that worried me. She would skip steps in medication protocols. She would chart vitals without actually checking them. I reported my concerns to our supervisor twice. Nothing changed. Then one night, Patty made a medication error. She gave a patient the wrong dosage of a blood thinner. The patient, an elderly man named Mr. Hendricks, had a severe bleeding episode. He survived, but barely. When the hospital investigated, Patty told them I had prepared the medication. She said I had mixed up the dosages. She said she had tried to catch the error, but it was too late. She lied with tears in her eyes and a voice that shook just enough to sound believable. I was suspended. I nearly lost my license. I spent 4 months fighting to clear my name while Marcus, who was 7 years old, ate cereal for dinner because I could not afford groceries and pay for a lawyer at the same time. My union representative helped me pull pharmacy records that proved I was not even on the floor when the medication was dispensed. The hospital quietly reinstated me. Patty Crane resigned before they could fire her. She disappeared from Cleveland after that. I heard she moved away, changed her last name, married someone with money. I never thought about her again because I was too busy surviving, until that dinner. Until I saw her face, and the way she flinched when I said her old name. Back in the restaurant, Patricia gripped the edge of the table. Richard looked confused. "Patricia, what is she talking about?" I did not shout. I did not make a scene. I had learned long ago that the truth does not need volume. It needs clarity. I said to the room, calm and steady, "I am not going to ruin this dinner, but I will not sit here and let someone who nearly destroyed my career call my home broken." Marcus stood up. "Mom, what is going on?" I looked at my son. "I will explain everything, but not here. Not tonight. Tonight belongs to you and Annabeth." Patricia's voice cut through like a blade. "She is lying. She has always been jealous. This is exactly the kind of woman she is." Annabeth turned to her mother. "Mum, what name did she just use? Who is Patty Crane?" Patricia snapped. "That is nobody. That is an old, meaningless name." But Richard Pemberton was staring at his wife now, with an expression I had seen before on the faces of patients' families when they realized the news was bad. He said quietly, "Patricia, you told me you were never a nurse. You told me you studied interior design in New York." Patricia's face changed. The cruelty melted into panic. "Richard, let me explain." He held up a hand. "Not here." He looked at me and said, "Dorothy, I apologize for what my wife said. Please sit down. We will sort this out privately." I sat. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady now. Marcus sat beside me and whispered, "Mum, are you okay?" I nodded. "I have been okay for 30 years. I can handle one more night." The dinner continued in a strange, tense silence. People ate without tasting. People smiled without meaning it. Patricia did not speak again. She sat like a statue, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth where the wine had stained the linen red. After the guests left, Marcus, Annabeth, Richard, and I sat in a private room at the restaurant. Patricia stood by the window with her arms crossed. She looked smaller now, like her expensive dress was wearing her instead of the other way around. Marcus said, "Someone please explain." So I told the truth. All of it. About Cleveland General, about Mr. Hendricks, about Patty Crane's lie, about the 4 months I spent fighting to save my career while feeding my son on almost nothing. I spoke plainly. I did not exaggerate. The facts were enough. When I finished, the room was silent. Annabeth had tears running down her cheeks. Richard sat very still, staring at Patricia like he was seeing a stranger. Marcus's voice was low and rough. "You nearly destroyed my mother's life, and then you invited her here to humiliate her again?" Patricia finally spoke. "That was a lifetime ago. I was young. I made a mistake." "You did not make a mistake," I said. "You made a choice. And then you spent 30 years hiding from it." Richard stood up slowly. "Patricia, did you lie to the hospital investigation?" She did not answer. "Did you blame this woman for something you did?" Her silence was the loudest thing in the room. Annabeth whispered, "Mom, just tell the truth." Patricia's lip trembled. Then she said, "I was scared. I thought I would go to prison. I thought my whole life was over. So I said it was her." She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something real in her eyes. Not kindness, not regret exactly, but recognition. She knew what she had done. She had always known. I said, "You did not just blame me. You almost took my son's mother away from him. He was 7 years old and eating cereal for dinner while I fought to keep my license. That was not a small thing, Patricia." She looked down at her hands. Richard turned away from her and walked to the other side of the room. I could see his jaw working, the way a man's jaw works when he is trying not to say something he cannot take back. Then Marcus said the thing that mattered most. He looked at Annabeth and said, "I love you. That has not changed. But there is something else your family needs to know." Patricia's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" Marcus pulled out his phone and set it on the table. 3 weeks ago, I found financial irregularities in the Pemberton Family Foundation accounts. Large sums redirected from charitable programs into private accounts. I did not report it yet, because I wanted to understand what I was seeing first. The room went completely still. Richard said, "What kind of irregularities?" Marcus showed him the screen. Numbers, transfers, dates. Richard studied them, and I watched his face change from confusion to understanding to something that looked like grief. He turned to Patricia. "These accounts, these are yours, are they not?" Patricia's composure finally shattered. "I can explain. Money meant for children's hospitals," Richard said, his voice breaking. "Money people donated because they trusted our name." Annabeth stood up. "Mom, did you steal from the foundation?" Patricia's eyes darted around the room like an animal looking for an exit. "It was not stealing. I borrowed it. I had debts. I was going to put it back." Richard shook his head slowly. "How much?" Marcus said quietly. "Based on what I have found so far, approximately $800,000 over 6 years. The number hung in the air. Richard put both hands on the table and leaned forward like the weight of it was pressing him down. He said, "This is why you did not want Marcus in this family. It was never about Dorothy. It was never about Cleveland or a broken home. You were afraid he would find the money." Everything clicked into place. The insults, the attempts to control the guest list, the way Patricia had tried to make me feel small from the very first dinner. She was not just a snob. She was afraid. She had seen Marcus's name on the foundation's financial team, and she had panicked. If she could drive him away, if she could break the engagement, maybe no one would ever look closely at those accounts. Patricia sank into a chair. She did not deny it. She just sat there, breathing hard, like someone who had been running for a very long time and had finally been caught. Annabeth was crying quietly. Marcus put his arm around her and said, "This is not your fault. None of this is your fault." Richard straightened up. He looked old in that moment, older than his years. He said, "Marcus, will you report this?" Marcus looked at me. I nodded once. He said, "I have to, People donated that money to help sick kids. I cannot pretend I did not see it. Richard closed his eyes for a long moment. Then he opened them and said, "Then report it. I will cooperate fully." He looked at Patricia. "You need a lawyer. I will make sure you have one. But I cannot protect you from this." Patricia whispered, "Richard, please." He shook his head. "You have been lying to me for 30 years. About your name, your past, and now this. I do not even know who you are." Those words hit Patricia harder than anything else that night. I watched her face crumble, and I will admit something that surprised even me. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt tired. 30 years of carrying a wound that someone else inflicted, and all I felt at the end was tired. Marcus handled the report carefully. He worked with the firm's compliance team. They contacted the authorities. An investigation began. The Pemberton Foundation's board was notified. Donors were told the truth. Patricia was charged with fraud and embezzlement 4 months later. She pleaded guilty to reduced charges and received 2 years of probation, full restitution, and community service. She lost her seat on every board she had ever sat on. The charity galas stopped inviting her. The museum took her name off the plaque. Richard filed for separation. He told Marcus, "I loved the woman I thought she was, but that woman never existed." Through all of it, Annabeth stayed with Marcus. She cried many nights. She asked hard questions. She sometimes got angry at the wrong people, the way hurt people do, but she never blamed Marcus for telling the truth, and Marcus never let her carry shame that was not hers. The wedding happened 6 months later than planned. Not at a fancy venue with 200 guests. At a small park in Chicago, under an oak tree, with 30 people who actually loved them. I sat in the front row in a blue dress I had bought with my own money, and when Marcus looked at me and smiled, I felt something break open inside my chest. Not pain. Relief. Relief that the boy I had raised in a small apartment with a dripping faucet had become a man who chose honesty over comfort. After the ceremony, Marcus found me standing by the oak tree, looking up at the branches. He said, "Mom, I keep thinking about what you told me when I was a kid. What did I tell you? You said the truth is heavy, but it is not as heavy as carrying a lie." I smiled. "I said that? Every time I wanted to cheat on a test or blame someone else for something, I did. You said it every time." I put my hand on his cheek. "Well, I was right." He laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that washes things clean. Annabeth came over and hugged me. She said, "Dorothy, I am sorry for everything my mother put you through." I held her tight. "You are not your mother. You never were. And you never have to be." She pulled back and looked at me with wet eyes. "I want to be like you." "Like me?" "Strong. Honest. The kind of person who stands up even when the whole room is watching." I shook my head. "I was not strong, sweetheart. I was just too stubborn to sit down." She laughed through her tears, and Marcus put his arms around both of us, and for a moment the 3 of us stood under that tree while the afternoon light came through the leaves like gold dust. And I thought, this is what a family looks like. Not a last name, not a bank account, just people who hold each other up when the wind blows hard. A year later, I was back in my apartment in Cleveland. The faucet had been fixed. Marcus paid for that. The hallway light worked now too. Small changes, but they mattered. One afternoon, I got a letter. No return address. I opened it and found a single sheet of paper with handwriting I did not recognize at first. It read, "Dorothy, I have thought about what I did to you every day for 30 years. I told myself I had no choice, but that was a lie. I had a choice, and I chose myself over you. I am not asking for forgiveness because I do not deserve it. I am asking you to know that I know, and I am sorry." It was signed Patty. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, holding that letter. I did not cry. I did not feel angry. I felt something quieter. Something like the feeling you get when a wound that has been open for years finally closes. Not healed. Not forgotten. Just closed. I folded the letter and put it in the same drawer where I keep Marcus's first report card and his father's work badge and the photo of me holding my nursing license the day I passed. The drawer where I keep proof that I survived. Because that is what I want you to know. I am not telling this story to make anyone feel sorry for me. I am telling it because there are women out there right now, sitting in small apartments, working double shifts, eating last so their children can eat first, and wondering if anyone sees them. I see you. And I want you to know something I learned the hard way. People will try to make you feel small because your life does not look like theirs. They will use fancy words and polished smiles to tell you that you are not enough. They will measure your worth by your address or your job title or the name on your mailbox. But your worth is not in any of those things. Your worth is in the way you show up for the people who depend on you. Your worth is in the truth you carry even when lying would be easier. Your worth is in the quiet, stubborn refusal to let the world decide who you are. I raised my son alone in a small apartment in Cleveland, Ohio. He grew up to be an honest man, who chose the truth over a comfortable lie, and the woman who tried to destroy me twice, once 30 years ago, and once at a dinner table, ended up destroying only herself. The best revenge I ever got was not revenge at all. It was simply living a life that proved her wrong, and that is the lesson I carry with me now, at 62 years old, sitting on my porch in the evening light, watching the street where my son once rode his bicycle, knowing that we made it, and that is enough.